Hi, my name is Amanda Fields, your proud RCAW Executive Director, here today with Mr. Trent Cotney, Partner and Construction Team Leader with Adams Reese, LLP, and General Counsel of RCAW, NRCA, and Western States, as well as other professional industry associations. He is also a best-selling author of the books OSHA Defense for the Construction Industry and OSHA Defense Know Your Rights. Today, Trent will give you some insight on how to start the year off right and help roofers overcome current and future industry challenges. Trent, please take it away.
Sure, happy to do so. What I wanted to do today is kind of go over some of the hot topics. There's some really current stuff in here. And obviously, lawyer by trade. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to focus on is legal issues and risk mitigation. But, really the goal here is to just kind of give you an update of what I'm seeing, what I anticipate is going to happen this year, highlight some key regulation and kind of, go through it that way. So first thing I want to talk about is sort of the economy. We've been kind of blessed. We dodged a bullet on a big recession so far. But I'm always concerned about that, right? And when I look at Pacific Northwest in particular, I've noticed that there's been some shrinking of backlog, in the people that I've talked to, and I'm kind of, fortunate that I get to travel as much as I do because I think that doing that allows me to hear what the issues are, right? I mean, if I was in Chicago last week, I'm in Detroit, next week, I'm at IRE, I'm, pretty much every week I'm somewhere. And that gives me a real understanding of what issues contractors are facing because I'm out there, pounding the pavement and with my ear to the ground. So what I've heard among a lot of contractors is that backlog is shrinking, that the residential market is softer than we would like it to be. Still work out there. Obviously there are exceptions to this, but I think it's a little soft. Probably going to remain that way, I think, for the next couple of months or so. Commercial backlog still there, but I think I've seen a little bit of a decrease. It's still going to happen. One thing that's interesting, and I mentioned it here in a bullet point, is that California has always been a hotbed for regulation affecting the roofing industry. A lot of times, 20 years ago, we used to say that regulations would start in California and work their way east. It's kind of funny now. I'm still seeing that, but I'm also seeing, Florida and Texas and some other states with insurance regulations moving out west. So, I do note that Cedar Shakes, there have been some significant restrictions on that, based on WUI requirements. That's wildlife, wildfire type requirements where they're concerned about brush and other things like that, causing the potential for spreading of flames and fire during those types of incidents. So California has significantly restricted use of cedar shingles, making it incredibly difficult to use. Obviously, still used in the Pacific Northwest, can anticipate that's going to continue, but obviously something, to keep your eyes on because I have seen some more restrictions in that regard. The cost of money has gone up, right? With interest rates going up, I've had a lot of contractors tell me, hey, the percentage rate on my credit line has gone up. I've had difficulty, obtaining loans for equipment, or fleet additions. That's just a sign of the times. I do think that's going to remain. There's been some discussions among the Fed that, inflation has cooled a little so that interest rates may go down. Honestly, I don't see that happening this year. I don't, this is a weird year. I'll just be honest with you. There's a lot of political BS out there. And I don't care, if you're blue or red or whatever it is. The politics and the propaganda that's associated with that really skews the truth even more so than usual. Because there's a lot of spins placed on it, right? If you're listening to the Biden administration, they're touting the fact that we haven't hit a recession and that everything is great. If you listen to Republicans, they say, there's impending doom and the economy's falling and everything else. Whereas the reality is somewhere in the middle. Again, nothing to do with politics. It's just kind of where we're at. So that is going to create some uncertainty. That uncertainty may affect the economy, right? And it's something I want you guys to kind of be prepared for. The closer we get to November, who knows what's going to happen, right? And that instability may spook potential, owners or developers that want to re-roof or build new projects. It may, cause the market to collapse. I don't know, right? All I know is we just keep doing what we're doing, and we'll figure it out when we get there. So that's a lot of the current economic issues that I'm seeing right now. I want to touch on some key construction law issues for you. And, one of the things that I try to watch trends, right? Because I think if I hear enough contractors talking about something, it means that, that's a big issue. And one of the biggest issues that I've seen among contractors lately is more and more design related liability for roofing contractors. It causes me a lot of concern because as roofing contractors, unless you're an architect or engineer, your job isn't to necessarily design a project. It's to build a roof or put on siding or whatever it is, right? So historically, and Washington is no exception, there's a doctrine out there, and I won't bore you with too much legal, but there's called the Spearin Doctrine. And the Spearin Doctrine, it's based on a case that occurred in the early 1900s. It's a U.S. Supreme Court case. And in that case, what happened is a contractor was relocating a sewer system for a public utility. And there was a big flood that came out and wiped out the sewer system. Okay, the owner said, hey, contractor, it's your responsibility. You own this project. You need to replace it at your cost. Contractor said, no, I built this pursuant to the plans and specs that you provided. So therefore, you need to execute this change order. Court looked at it, Supreme Court looked at it and said, contractor, you're right. You have what's known as an implied warranty of constructability, meaning that if an owner provides you with a set of plans and specs, you should be able to build it based on that. Okay. So that is, a classic rule. I gave you a case site here talking about, how Washington's adopted it. But there are ways to cut against this rule in contracts and otherwise, but keep that in mind. It's normally not your responsibility to be responsible for design. Now, the problem comes in when, think about every project that you do. I don't care if you're a residential or commercial contractor listening to this. You're going to have field changes, right? You're going to have to flash areas that weren't identified. The system manufacturer may not have specified everything that needs to be done. So you've got to figure stuff out in field. You're submitting shop drawings, right? You're making substitutions. You're doing all these things that can potentially affect design. So what I would like you to do is in your scope, not only say what you're going to do, but what you're not going to do. Okay. This is a waiver of design liability. I'm sure you'll get a copy of this, but happy to send it to you in whatever format you want. You can email me or Amanda will get you whatever you need. Okay. This is simplistic by nature. It can be expanded or contracted as necessary, but the goal here is to make it clear that you are not a designer. It is not your responsibility. I don't care what the documents say. It's an architect or engineer, and it's not your fault, right? I had when I was in Chicago, I spoke on a panel on plans versus specifications. A lot of people smarter than I was, on that panel, but really had an opportunity to drill down into the minutia of what can happen on a roofing project, when the plans differ from specs or from manufacturers, recommendations as far as installation guidelines. So keep this in mind, make sure you include it. Hopefully it'll save you some money. Nothing that you want to check on is errors and emissions insurance. You can get a CGL rider that will include that. It won't cost you much because you're not a design professional, right? Or you can obtain a separate E&O rider. Check it with your insurance agent. I always say any roofing contractor needs three things. They need a good lawyer, good accountant, and a good insurance agent. Make sure your insurance agent knows construction, knows roofing. I'm sure there's some agents that are part of the association. That is a good resource for you. Check into that because it may save you from having to hire a lawyer, and nobody likes lawyers. Liability for using existing drainage. I wanted to make sure that you guys had a provision similar to this. I have over the years, encountered a variety of issues where you go into a project primarily on the commercial side, and the scope does not include touching scuppers, drains, pipes, downspouts, gutters, whatever it might be. And inevitably they don't work as intended, overflow, malfunction, causing damage to either the roof system or damage to the building envelope. You know, it may cause a collapse or may cause some other problems. So what I want you to do is be cognizant of this design type issue. If you are not in there, you need to disclaim liability for stuff that's related to existing drainage. I don't have the provision in this slide deck, but if you want to get sued, do work for a building that has an interior drainage system, interior gutter-based system. You know, it's one of those things where on paper it's beautiful and architects win awards for it, but the reality of it is you're just dramatically increasing the chance that you're going to have water intrusion, and the cost to remediate that water intrusion is going to be significantly more because it's inside the building envelope. So watch out for stuff like that. I talk about this all the time. You know, architects come up with brilliant things on paper that are beautiful, but they just don't work. And it's your job as a contractor to say, this is hot garbage and needs to get out of here, right? And if you don't say that, then you're going to be on the hook later. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody, right? All right, moving along here. So next thing I want to talk about is bubble test. Bubble test, also known as negative pressure, or the Bell test. This is a test that is often required. It's required in factory mutual specs. So if you're doing an FM insured roof, it's on there. But I've had a lot of consultants that think they're super smart, or owners say that it's required to pass a bubble test. I have been on a roof and I've been able to change the results of a bubble test by how close I stand to it. It is not a reliable test. There is an article in Professional Roofing Magazine, NRCA's magazine, by Mark Graham in September 23 that talks about how unreliable this test is. So I don't like it because I've had way too many roofing contractors not get paid because they can't pass this bubble test, when I know they know, and every expert that we've hired knows that that roof is perfectly fine. So say no to bubble tests. They're no good. I'll stake, my rep on it. Don't do it. Want to talk a little bit now about immigration law. Always a big subject. I mean, look, immigration is a big political issue, right? And I'm not saying that I know everything. I do know that the majority of our labor is immigrant labor, migrant labor. I would also say that the majority of that labor is probably not here legally. And I think every roofing contractor wants to hire legal workers, but I think we need a better vehicle to do that. I think our current system is broken, and I think we need to find a way to allow construction workers to work here, pay taxes, do whatever they got to do, whether it's temporary or full-time, I don't care, but they're going to do it anyway. They're not taking other jobs. It's one of the things that we advocate for in Roofing Day. So be mindful of that, because it will continue to be a hot button issue. What's interesting is they have talked about E-Verify 2.0, and it's known as E-Verify Next Gen. This is an interesting concept, and the idea behind it is, and a potential employee applies once to this new E-Verify system, and then one and done. You got it for life. You're in the database. You're legit. You don't have to come do it again. It creates a system of accountability, and they can take that E-Verify to the next place they go to. So it makes things a little bit more simplistic as far as how it will work. Now, I'll tell you, I have yet to see the federal government do anything that involves technology well. It normally takes them 10 years to figure it out. Classic example of that is the electronic record keeping for OSHA. They're still trying to figure some of that out. So don't know how this is going to work, but I do see this being sort of a sign of the times. You're going to have a digital fingerprint that will follow you, and basically you'll only have to do it once, similar to like a TSA pre-check or a clear or something like that you get at the airport. Okay. Obviously, LNI has a Oh, yeah. Okay. So Amanda has asked, can I talk a little bit more about E-Verify 2.0? I don't know everything about it yet, and all I know is I've heard about it, right? So the idea behind it is that the employee would submit the information into the system. Then they would get the notification back, and the employer would automatically receive that notification. And if that employee leaves that employer, then they would go on to be able to take that verification with them. So that is all I know. It is in the implementation stage at this point. And I don't even think they have all the answers as far as how it looks or what it will look like. So obviously LNI governs, Washington has a state OSHA plan, but where federal goes, state follows. So what I want to do is update you. There are some heat rules already, that Washington State's plan has, but this new federal plan has a few things that are different. I mentioned the states that have it right now. The basis for requiring this new heat rule was because they lost big. OSHA lost big in this case, Secretary of Labor v. Sturgill Roofing, where the judge in that case basically said you can't rely on the general duty clause for heat standard. You need a specific heat standard. So they said, fine, hold my beer. And now we're here where they're creating their own heat injury and illness rule. This is the proposed heat rule. It's going to require enhanced monitoring, enhanced training. It may require different types of PPE depending on how hot it is. And there are going to be two different types of heat that are going to be looked at. One is an initial heat trigger where it's, these I've put the degrees here, what it is, and then a high heat trigger. And it may cause different things to happen. So one of the things that I tell anybody with regard to new rules, and this hasn't been adopted yet, it will be. It will be before the election. Absolutely, I'd bet money on it. Okay. The first thing that you must do is you must train your workers. That's the easy kill for any compliance officer, state or federal, is they will ask you, have you been trained on the new heat protocols? And if the answer is what, then that's an easy kill for them. So that's the first step. Okay, the second step is making sure, especially during summer, when it can get a little bit hotter. I mean, Washington's fortunate that in the summer it doesn't get crazy hot, but you are going to have some times where this can potentially be an issue. Now, if you're in places like Arizona or, New Mexico, Texas or Florida, then, it'll be, I'm in Tampa today, it will be 80 degrees here tomorrow. So that gives you an idea. Pretty much you're always going to be in this heat trigger. So the key there is to make sure that you train your workers on whatever the new standard is once it comes out. Now, myself and a variety of others have been stakeholders where we have submitted our comments and suggestions and made a variety of things that would help the industry. This is not the kind of thing where you say, no, don't do this. It's going to happen, right? So our job is to kind of get on the train and figure out if we can maneuver in a way to where it is more beneficial to us. The biggest concern that I have is that I don't want this to create a reason for OSHA to come on a job site solely because it's hot. Normally they have to have a reason to come on a job site, but if it's 80 degrees somewhere, I don't want them coming out and saying, you know what, it's hot. I want to, ask your workers, have they had some water today? And then, oh yeah, there's the 4 guys on a roof without fall protection. So watch out for this. I put some administrative controls that they're suggesting here. Variety of different things depending on whether they're indoor or outdoor. It can be everything from altering work schedules to making sure that there's, cool down breaks, water breaks, hydration, electrolytes, all kinds of stuff. There's some suggestion they may require both an electrolytic drink like Gatorade as well as water. A lot is still up in the air, but the one thing for certain is the bottom bullet point. You will absolutely have additional training, regardless of what happens. You will have additional record keeping, regardless of what happens, and you must have emergency response requirements. So signs of heat illness or injury, identifying that, is going to be really important as far as training for your, supervisory level personnel. All right. This is a list of industry concerns that a lot of people voiced as it relates to this heat standard. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the things that we talked about when we had concerns with it. There was a joint letter that was submitted to OSHA. Again, I don't know to what extent they will adopt these things, but it's important that we get our word out there just so that everybody can kind of hear, at least what our position is with regard to it. There has to be, I am 100% for safety. Don't misconstrue anything I'm saying. Every penny you spend on safety is a penny well spent. But I also think that you need to balance business with safety and business with legal and business with everything else, right? And there has to be some practical analysis of this, that combines the desire for safety with how business works in the real world. Problem is we've got, a bunch of eggheads and bureaucrats that don't know how that's never lifted a hammer in their life. They don't understand the reality of what it's like to put on a roof. So these are just some of the things. I'm not going to go through them, but I wanted you to see sort of what our concerns were. Another thing that is causing me some concern, and this will potentially affect you. Again, this is a federal standard, but state laws will conform to it. The walk-around representative designation. The Biden administration has been very pro-union. Obviously, a big part of his base. So almost every federal regulation, from the Infrastructure Act to OSHA regulations, have some union leaning towards it. This is no exception. What the walk-around rule is that normally when a compliance officer comes out to a job site, they say, hey, can I walk around, take pictures, measurements, whatever, look at stuff, okay? What this rule is trying to do is to say that the employee or employees that are on the job can request that an outside union rep, even if you're not a union shop, you don't have to be a union shop. They can request that a union rep or some other third-party rep, could be a competitor, accompany OSHA during a walk-around. Raises a ton of different concerns. Obviously there's due process issues, job site liability. What if one of those people gets hurt? Who's liable for it? So I get asked the question, Trent, I know I can refuse access to a job site if LNI or OSHA comes out, right? But you've told me in the past that's a bad idea because they can go back and get a warrant and then they're going to have it out for you. And I say, yeah, that's exactly what I've said in the past. But Trent, can I refuse to have, let's say this rule goes into effect, can I refuse to have a union rep accompany, get on the job site if we're non-union? I would tend to say, yeah, you probably could. And I would find it hard to believe that a warrant would be issued based on that refusal. I would really want to challenge that a little bit more than I would allowing OSHA on the job site to begin with. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody, and you can see why I'm a little bit concerned about this. The less people involved in an investigation, the better, especially if they don't have any reason to be there. So just alerting you to that. Those are the two big OSHA things that I have seen that will be big this year. Both of them will happen before election, guaranteed. Okay. These are some more industry concerns with regard to the walk-around rule. You can see there's nothing in this rule that restricts third parties' clothing. It could be a competitor. It could be anybody. It leaves it up entirely to the inspector to decide, whether or not the third party would contribute to the inspection, right? It's not good. I don't get this. I really don't. This is one of those ones where you're just kind of scratching your head. This is a rule which I think if challenged, would potentially fail or get overturned if you get the right court. And that's a big if, because it depends on where you're at, right? Switching now. Okay, so far we've talked about construction issues, right? Give you a few contract provisions. We talked about immigration a little bit. Talked about OSHA and LNI. We're going to turn to the Department of Labor. Now, Department of Labor, there's two sides of it. There's OSHA, and then there's wage and hour, right? So wage and hour deals with minimum wage and overtime. And there has been suggestions that the Fair Labor Standards Act will be revised to increase the exemption level. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, if you're paid enough, you're exempt from minimum wage overtime requirements, right? You're paid a salary and that's all it is, right? You're not paying on an hourly basis. They're going to raise that, and I put what the anticipated suggested raises are going to be. So you see the difference between, standard salary level and highly compensated and starting to get up there a little bit, right? The other thing that's interesting is just like with OSHA, they're going to have an automatic increase every year, okay? Which is bad in my opinion, because, inflation is always going to go up, which means this is always going to go up. And sometimes wages tend to drag behind inflation. But what this will do is unfairly do, and you see what I'm saying? Like it's the inflation rates are going to be higher than what wage rates are anyway. It always outpaces, right? But they're going to adjust it based on inflation, not what the wage rates are, which causes me some concern looking into the future. Again, any questions, comments, let me know. This is a big one. I want to pause on this one for a little bit. I'm gonna have a dramatic water break here. Okay. For those of you that are listening to this, I guarantee the majority of you use sub labor. Okay. And the reason is I've seen the stats. I know that in the United States, about 85 to 90% of residential contractors use some form of sub labor. And I know commercials pushing about 60, 65%. They may not use it all, right? But guarantee most of you probably use some sub labor. And if you don't, God bless you. I'm sure there's people out there that don't, that have their own crews forever and so on and so forth. But sub labor is a dominant force within the industry. Biggest reason is lack of skilled labor, right? It caused the rise of subcontractors. So Department of Labor historically has struggled with trying to figure out if a subcontractor is truly a subcontractor or if they're just your employees, but you're not paying them right. Okay. So classic example is you've got a sub crew that only works for you, doesn't work for anybody else, that wears your gear, that goes to the jobs you tell them to, doesn't have any marketing or website or anything else. They're really your employees. You're just not paying them right. You're not doing payroll tax. You probably haven't kept I-9s on them, right? You haven't done all those things, benefits, any of that kind of stuff that an employee would have, you don't have. So it can be a problem, right? If the Department of Labor comes out and audits you and determines that your 1099 salesperson or your 1099 labor is really misclassified, then you're going to get a nice little fine and some potential other problems on top of that. So prior to January 9th of this year, just a little bit ago, right? Hot off the presses, the rule was the economic realities test, where they would look at a variety of different factors, 7 different factors, and they would determine whether or not, what is the economic reality of the person that's working for the subcontractor that's working for you, right? That has changed. And right now, what they are doing is they're looking at the totality of the circumstances. So I'm going to give you the law and I'm going to tell you what it really means. Now, this doesn't go into effect until March 11th, 2024. March 11th, 2024. Okay. This is what the rule states. These are the new 6 factors. Some of them are old, some of them are rephrased, but these are the 6 different rules. Okay. First one, if the worker has an opportunity for either profit or loss. So what they're going to look for is they're going to see if that subcontractor has the ability to negotiate their rate of pay. Do they have bargaining? Do they, to get more work? If the answer to those questions are yes, then they're probably an independent contractor. If the answer is no, then that's a strike against you. Okay. Next one is what investments are made by the employer and the worker. Does the sub purchase their own PPE? Does the employer provide the equipment or does the sub provide the equipment? Does the sub have its own trucks? If the answers are yes, they have all of that, then that's good for being an independent contractor. If the answer is no, then not so much. Okay. What degree of performance the working relationship has, permanence, sorry. What degree of permanence the working relationship has. So if this sub has worked for you for the last 10 years and nobody else, that's not good. Okay. If the sub only works for you every once in a while and works for 10 other contractors, it's better. Okay. Fourth one, the nature of the work and the degree of control the work has over it. So this goes into a little bit of what the California rule is, which is if you have a subcontractor that is doing something that is part of your daily operations, right? It's nothing special. It's part of your daily operations, like tear off and putting on a roof. Then that suggests that it's probably, and it should be an employee and not a 1099, right? Now, if they're a sub that's putting on copper finial or something crazy that you don't normally do, then that's completely different. But that's a factor. Okay, none of these are determinative. It's a sliding scale. Number 5, if the work is integral to the employer's business, is the work performed necessary and critical to the success of the company? Clearly, any roofing sub out there is doing the labor, and yes, it's critical. So you see where this is more problematic. That's, a difficult one to prove that, you're not an employee. Last is how the worker skill and initiative are utilized. If there's no specialized skills, if they're just tearing off and slinging shingles, then, it is what it is. If there is some special stuff, let's say you're putting on a, low slope, metal panel type system over purlins or something, and you have a sub that specializes in that. Yeah, well, then that's a good thing. Okay. So what happens is that's the law. Okay. Recognize it just came out. It's going to be challenged. There's going to be all kinds of opinions and lawyers are going to do their thing, but this is the law. So what does that mean? That means that a Department of Labor investigator will come out, and this is how it normally happens. So Department of Labor is not driving around right now in trucks looking for contractors. They don't have enough people to do that. But it happens in one of 3 ways. Okay, usually. Pissed off employee. Employee feels like they're not being paid what they're supposed to be paid. That you might be paying them piece rate, but they're not getting paid overtime, and they talk to a bad guy lawyer, and then all of a sudden, something is filed with the Department of Labor. That starts an audit. That audit is like an onion, right? You peel a layer and you get something else, and then pretty soon they start seeing these checks going to all these subs, and they start asking questions. They start asking the subs questions, and then they realize, you know what? These 100 crew members on these subs should really be your employees, and that's going to be a mighty nice find that's going to get me a promotion, right? That's what they're thinking. Okay. The second way it happens is pissed off former employee. So you fire somebody, they're upset. That's how, you can see how that happens. Third thing is competitor. So competitor will rat you out. Hey, got a guy out here, he's using subs, he's not paying them right. You need to go investigate. Those are the 3 main ways I see these things start. And then once they start, it's very important that you get out ahead of it quickly. We do a ton of DOL audit defense. And one of the things that we always try to do is be cooperative, be upfront, but control the flow of information and make sure that, we're presenting the truth factually, but also doing our best to get it wrapped up as quickly as we can so that, the skeletons aren't found. Every contractor has a skeleton or 2 or 10. I just know that. I've been in this industry long enough to know that there's no lily white contractor out there, and that's fine. It's unfortunately, it's the nature of the business. All I can do is tell you legally, this is what the issue is. So you can see each of these 6 components. If an investigator has to look at it from the totality of the circumstances, they're going to look at it and say, they're almost always going to say, yeah, I've looked at the totality of circumstances and I think they should be employees. And then it's going to put you in a defensive posture. You're going to have to say, no, it's not the case. And then it just becomes a big hot mess. So what totality of the circumstances, what it really means is you're guilty until you prove you're innocent, and it's an uphill battle. Okay. Misclassification cases are hard to beat. They're better to mitigate. Okay, and I'm being honest with you. I'm the kind of guy where if your dog has fleas, I'll be the first to tell you it's hard to beat a misclassification case, especially if you're dirty at all, right? So recognize that this is a bad thing for contractors. Now, is this going to stay this way forever? It's politically driven. Department of Labor is an executive agency and the president governs that. So don't know. I mean, we've had a variety of changes. We've had a variety of enforcement changes. So don't know what the future holds, but right now, as of March 11, 2024, this is a law. This is a big issue. Hot off the presses. Okay. Pause in there just for a second. I'm going to turn to the next big issue. Corporate Transparency Act, CTA. Okay. This is another stupid, I'm just gonna be honest, this is stupid. You know, I don't believe government, any regulation that is a good thing, really. I rarely see a piece of regulation where I'm like, boy, this is great. I'm glad they did that. Usually it's just another hoop that you have to jump through, and I get it. But as someone that defends contractors and defends the industry, generally there's always a sigh every time I see another piece of, legislation or regulation that's out there. Corporate Transparency Act, 2021, they said, look, what we want to do is, the stated reason was we want to combat tax fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, and other illegal activities. So this thing took effect January 1, 2024. And what it said is that if you are a small business, and includes both domestic and foreign, doesn't matter whether you're a C Corp or an S Corp or an LP or an LLP or whatever it is, you've got to report, right? You've got to report certain things. What information do you have to report? Well, you've got to report, and here's the key thing. I'm going to jump around a little bit. If your entity was created before January 1st, 2024, you've got until the end of this year to potentially report. If it's created after January 1st, 2024, you got to report within 30 days. Now, there has been a request to extend this. The House passed a bill almost unanimously to extend these requirements, but the president hasn't signed off on it. So right now, this is good law. So what information do you have to report? You got to report company name, all that kind of stuff, and all the beneficial owners. How are beneficial owners defined? Anybody that owns 25% or more, okay, or has substantial control over the company. Are there exemptions? Yes, there are exemptions. There's a large operating company exemption, which requires that you meet three things. First is you have to employ, and we just talked about W-2 versus 1099, sub-labor are not employees, right? They don't count. You must employ more than 20 full-time workers in the United States. You have to have physical offices in the United States, not, virtual offices. Got to be a physical office. And you have to report more than 5 million in gross sales or receipts based on the prior year's tax return. Now, each of these sections has an FAQ on it that gives you more information. What happens is you prepare this report and it's submitted to FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Department of the United States Treasury, Department of Treasury. And when you submit it, you attest and swear that that information is correct. So if the information is not correct, or if you fail to disclose it, or if you do not file, it could form the basis of a crime. Okay. Now, many of you that are listening to this, you may say, oh, I fall on an exemption. I got $10 million. I've got 100 employees. I got offices throughout Washington. I'm good to go. You might be with regard to that company, but do you have other companies out there? Do you have a company that is a holding company? Do you have a company that owns property? Do you have a company that owns your equipment or leases? I got a few companies that fall into this, and they're just holding companies, right? You got to report it. So how do you get it reported? Again, you've got at least a year to figure this out. But what I am seeing so far is that CPAs are the entities that are reporting a lot of this. Okay, they are submitting it. They are attesting on behalf of the fact. Recommend that you really drill down into this and figure out what's what. This scares me. And I think the primary reason that they did this is so that if someone doesn't submit it or they don't truthfully identify what the stuff is, then it forms yet another basis for a crime if they're targeting that person, right, or that entity. And I think that's one of the things there. It's an easy way to slip stuff up. I think it's a dumb law. I really do. I think it's stupid. And, you know, the whole point of having holding companies is to have some privacy, and this eliminates a lot of that. So, again, another law, here we are, you know, it's first month and we've already got a handful. Want to spend a little bit of time talking about business related issues. Hottest topic in 23 by far was private equity and selling your businesses. I was at Best of Success this year, spoke a little bit on this topic, and I surveyed the audience of 500 contractors, and I said, hey, raise your hand if you have not been solicited by a private equity company. 3 people raised their hand. So you probably have a ton of emails. You probably heard people about it, talking about it. And I don't care if you want to sell your business or not. You may be listening to saying, I will never sell my business. I will die at my desk, you know, hallelujah. And that's fine. But there's one thing that I see a lot of contractors screw up, and that is they failed to prepare. Regardless of whether you're going to sell or not, you need to get your house in order. So the last portion of this conversation is I want to tell you what I see, okay? Now, I get dragged in a lot for M&A deals because of my specialized knowledge of, you know, licensure and roofing and a lot of the other things that deal with that. And, you know, we got other lawyers that handle due diligence and all that kind of stuff, but I get to see what happens. And some of this is from my perspective as an advisor, just kind of seeing mistakes that contractors have made along the way. So how do you prepare? There's a lot of things that you need to understand mentally and document wise that are necessary for a transaction. The first thing that you've got to really understand is that it is painful. It's painful going through this. I had my own business for 10 years. I merged with the firm I'm at now. So I've got real world experience dealing with this. And I can tell you, finding some of these documents is you will spend hours upon hours locating all this. So the stuff that I'm mentioning here is the playbook for any investor that is looking to buy your company. And even if they're not looking to buy your company, if you're going to hand it off to the next generation, you need this stuff anyway. You got to have your ducks in a row because banks will ask for it. Sometimes sureties will ask for it. Credit, you know, suppliers may ask for it. You got to have that stuff. So first and foremost, do you have your corporate docs, right? I've had plenty of contractors that say, hey, you know, we're going to sell the business, and they don't even have they don't have bylaws. They don't have meeting minutes. They don't have consents. They don't have any corporate books whatsoever. And we got to spend the time recreating that, right? Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to do it. There's a correct way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And you need to backfill that stuff so that you've got it. Do you have all your business locations and business names, and are they properly registered to do business? Do you have the correct licensure? How does that licensure work if you sell your business? Well, who are your shareholders? How many shares are outstanding? Who have they been issued to? Who are the officers? Who are the directors? All of this stuff should be on a piece of paper somewhere so that a potential investor looking to buy your company can put their hands on it, or your son or daughter, right? Corporate policies and procedures. I'll give, here's a good example. So I had a 2012 Jeep Wrangler Sport, basic, and on purpose. You know, there's no reason to put bells and whistles on a Jeep, especially when I'm taking it off road. I added a bunch of crap afterwards. I put on some metal bumpers and a winch. I raised it a little bit, put black tires, all that stuff. Has nothing to do with legal, but had it for 10 years. It took a beating. Some rust. I cleaned up, you know, it had a lot of miles on. Got to the end of last year and I was like, you know what, I gotta trade this in. So did I take it, you know, with 2 inches of mud and, you know, rust all over it into the dealership or, you know, wherever to trade in? No, I didn't do that. What I did is first I took it to the car wash and I cleaned it. Okay, then I got some Rust-Oleum and I scraped off all the rust, and then I coated it again. right? And then I made sure the winch worked, and I cleaned out, the weather guard floor mats that I had. I, made sure that all the Taco Bell wrappers and everything else were gone. The dog hair was scrubbed out, and I got it ready to sell. Okay. That example is the same thing you need to do with your business, right? You need to put a bow on it. If your books look like crap, then the investor is going to be, this person's a joke and I don't want to deal with it, right? If you look professional, if you act professional, it's going to increase the value of your business. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so clean your Jeep before you trade it in. That's the goal of this conversation. They're going to ask for every tax imaginable: state taxes, federal taxes, payroll taxes, sales taxes, any communication with any tax entity. Washington loves to tax you. They love their taxes, right? So they're going to want to know everything there is to know about tax law, and anything that's out there. That is a big liability. So you got to be able to put your hands on that pretty quickly. They're going to ask for seller financial information. A lot of this you can pull off QuickBooks, some of it you can't, right? You got your normal things like P&L reports, balance sheets, but a lot of times what you want to do is you want to get those certified financials, right? You get a CPA to come in. It's one thing for you to pull it off of QuickBooks and say, here it is. It's another thing for a CPA to say, yeah, I've audited these financials and they're legit, and here's my stamp of approval. They're going to want access to every bank account, investment account, equipment, and tangible assets. I worked with a client and we spent probably 10 to 15 hours trying to locate the title to some pieces of equipment for their transaction that closed last year. You'd be surprised how little information you actually got at your fingertips. You need to think of it. Where's the title? Where are the insurance policies? All that kind of stuff. And here's something a lot of people don't think about. Okay. Do you have any intellectual property? Do you have a trademark on your name, on your logo? Do you have proprietary stuff, social media accounts? Do you own your website domain? Is all that transferable, or do you have it with some third party that controls it, right? That has value. It doesn't have a lot of value, so don't misconstrue anything I'm saying, but it has value, and you need to be able to locate it and transfer it. So understand that intangible part because it's really important. Contracts. Now, obviously, I'm a dirty lawyer. I live and breathe contracts. These are the key contracts that they will ask for. Okay, this is not me just coming up with this crap. Like I said, we did $500 million in M&A last year in roofing, so I know exactly what these private equity companies and investors are going to ask for. Applicator agreements. You're a commercial contractor. They want to see your applicator agreement, and is it transferable? Do you even have a copy of it? If you don't, you need to ask for one, but I guarantee you that if you ask for one, they're going to ask you to sign another one, which is probably worse. Recognize you can negotiate any applicator agreement. I do it probably once a week. Okay. Credit agreements. They're going to ask for your supplier agreement, regardless of whether it's with Beacon, ABC, whoever, whatever distributor suppliers out there. They're going to want to see what your relationships are. If you have direct for manufacturers, they're going to want to see what those terms are. Any vendor agreements. If you use 1099 sales reps, they're going to want to see those. What does your customer contract look like, and what does your subcontract look like? Here's something that I want to throw in there. Do you do storm work? Are you insurance based? Because there's a separate due diligence list that is given to you if you are. They want to make sure that your marketing and advertising is compliant, so that you're not saying you get a free roof, you got to pay your deductible, right? They want to make sure that you're not an unlicensed public adjuster. There's a separate sheet that you go to that we have to tick down to make sure that you're checking the boxes there. They'll ask for all your lease agreements, technology agreements, all that stuff. That's pretty common sense, right? You guys hopefully have that somewhere. And if you don't, again, I don't care if you want to sell your business or not. Doesn't, but at some point, you're going to either transport or die. It's just going to happen. And you need to have all this stuff in line so there's still some value for your sweat equity. Okay. Restrictive covenants. Now, every state differs. Some of you may do work in different states, Oregon, California, wherever. Recognize that you want to know what kind of employment agreements do you have in place? Are they transferable? Do they have, what are you doing to button up your key employees? Keeping those C-level people with you during a transfer is very important, because I've seen stuff. I have seen companies completely fail in less than a year. Go from, eight figures plus to nothing. Because private equity got in there, didn't know what they were doing. All the key people left and took everything with them, and that was it. So make sure that you know what your exclusive arrangements are, your guarantees. If you have a surety relationship, recognize you got a personal identification agreement on there. Those are all things you need to consider and figure out ways around. They'll ask about insurance and pending claims. They want copies of all these different policies, every policy you got, CGL, comp, no matter what it is. Talked about the storm restoration checklist, and they're going to want to know pending and threatened claims. So you got unruly customers out there, you got to identify them. You can't hide anything, because if you do, it'll come back to bite you. Here's the key thing. Do you have the right mind frame? I always say that owners make horrible employees. Okay. And, you know, I'm not an exception there. I was, you know, you run a business and you live and breathe it, and you look over that precipice daily. It makes you, you know, fire tested, and it's hard to be told what to do. But you got to recognize that you may be in a situation where that's going to happen, at least for a couple of years, and you need to suck it up. And if you can't do that, then you're not ready to sell. You will know when the time is ready to sell. I have never once looked back and said, boy, I wish I still had my own firm. I made the right move. I brought all my people over and never looked back. I needed a platform where I could focus and do what I do, instead of, you know, ordering toilet paper and, you know, negotiating lease agreements. So you have to have the same mindset. Understand, what does it look like? What role will you have? Will you be a license holder? Will you be sales? Will you be operations? Or will you be on an island somewhere, which is usually preferable. So recognize whatever that is and just make sure you're comfortable with it. I've got about 8 minutes left. I covered a lot in a short amount of time. So what I want to do is kind of tee it up and see if any of you guys have questions for me. I'm happy to talk on this or any subject. But these are just a few of the things. One of the last things I'll mention is, how long will this PE trend last, private equity trend last? We're probably in the second quarter right now. It's going to last, I think, through 2024. There could be some things that shake that up. If there's a lot of uncertainty because of this election, if the wars heat up, if anything like that, it could turn stuff off. But roofing is attracted to private equity because it's easily scalable. There's relatively low barriers to entry, and it checks their construction box for them. Private equity companies are looking to diversify, just like you would with a portfolio of stock, and they need a construction component, and roofing is the easiest for them to grab onto. That's why there's so much money right now. You know, honestly, I'm in the wrong business. I should open up a roofing company right now and sell it to PE. But that's what I saw over this last year, and I think it's still hot. I think we've hit crest and we're starting to come down. Probably got about another year, maybe less, before it goes back to normal. So, but yeah, what questions can I answer for you guys? So I want to let you know again, I will provide all of this information to you in whatever format that you want. Please feel free to reach out with any questions you've got. You know, it's part of one of the resources. You know, there's a member benefit that we offer through RCAW, where you get 15 minutes free advice. You just need to say, I'm with RCAW. I'm looking for the member benefit. You can email me direct. You know, we've got 400 lawyers here, but you get me. So happy to answer any questions you got. Like I said, I'm on the road constantly. You know, feel free to say hi. If I see you at IRE, I'll have a booth there. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you there. And again, any questions after the fact, just shoot me something, let me know.
Thank you, Trent.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love this presentation. I love your honesty. And I agree with what you said. Keep doing what you're doing. It is very important to keep moving forward. And you made several very important points in this Lunch and Learn, and I hope everyone takes advantage of this webinar. And you said that we'll get a copy of this PowerPoint, Trent?
Yeah, I'll send it to you via PDF. If not today, then tomorrow.
All right. Again, moving forward, thank you, Trent. Thank you for all this information. We need to keep our businesses thriving. And that, as Trent said, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to Trent or myself, and we'll make sure you get all the information you need. And also, RCAW has our annual Pacific Northwest Regional Trade Show on March 1st from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Muckleshoot Casino in Auburn. We are showcasing our very first fastest shingle competition, live streamed by Roofers Coffee Shop. It will be a great day of education, building your business, and networking. Please register online at www.rcaw.com or give us a call at 253-561-7229. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
See you guys.